Welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. So welcome everybody here in person. Welcome everybody online that's watching the live stream. Welcome to our session focused primarily on EPBD. So I'm sure that EPBD is very close to your activities, otherwise you wouldn't be here in the room. And it's a very timely session because, you know, it hasn't been such a long time since the EPBD, the revised EPBD, so the version of this year, has been published in the official journal of the EU. So I'm very happy to be moderating this session. I'm Andrei Lițiu, coming from EPB Center, where I have the position of Executive Director. And I'm also working for RIVA, the Federation of HVAC Associations, as a Building Performance Advisor. Our session is co-organized. If you see on the slides all the logos, so that's the group of projects funded by the European Union that have been working and will continue to work to support the implementation of the EPBD. Primarily, they are focusing on energy performance certificates, but I will show you in the next slides how that's interconnected to everything else in EPBD. Our session is right after lunch, so I know the energy is not all of it going up to the brain. So what I'll do, because this is helpful also for me, although I skip lunch, but it's always important to keep yourself in the present. So how many of you are aware about the power pose? Can I see a raise of hands for the people in the room? Okay, good. So you start the session with learning something. Maybe you know it under a different name. So the power pose is the position where you keep your back straight and you pull your shoulders backwards. So experts say that when you adopt this position, the stress goes away, you get energized, and all the energy goes to the building automation and control system of the body, to our brain. So thank you for that. Another question that I have for you, because I'm always curious, is there anybody here that's the first time at the Sustainable Energy Week? Okay, we have some people. Then people that have been coming more than 5 years? Okay, and more than 10 years? Okay. Good. So we have a very nice mixture. What about EPBD? How long have you been involved in EPBD at EU level, national level? More than 5 years? More than 10? I stop at 10, by the way. So if somebody's been from the very beginning. Okay, so I'll get to it. I encourage you, as our great lineup of speakers present, if you have any questions that come to your mind, to write them down. We won't be taking questions immediately after the presentations. We have at the end a moderated panel debate. So just write them down, and then if you have a very good memory, then just record them in your memory, and then we will try to address them as much as possible. For the people watching the live stream, I'm sorry. We wanted to keep the session as streamlined as possible to avoid any technicalities that might interfere with the flow, so we will not be taking questions from the online people that are watching the live stream. Thank you for your understanding. So we are now in the welcome and introduction part. I introduced myself. Following me, there's Stefan Moser, the head of unit from DGNR, that has been carefully managing this revision. So before I introduce the other speakers, I really would like to congratulate Stefan and his team. Also the colleagues at CINEA that supported the efforts, because we are now there with this revision, and it wasn't an easy process, and you guys ensured and coordinated and supported arriving at this important moment. So a round of applause for Stefan and his team. Then we have Ulrike Nuscheler from CINEA. I don't remember the long name, I just say the Green Deal Agency. So her and her colleagues, they are managing all the EU funds that are supporting the EU-funded projects dealing with building performance. And I say building performance because it's not only about energy, it's also about environmental performance, indoor quality, indoor climate, and so on. And then we have two dear colleagues from the project side. They have been working for quite a long time in the EPBD arena and also supporting from the EU project side of things. First, we have from Efficient Buildings Europe. There has been a name change recently. It used to be EuroAce, so it's Efficient Buildings Europe now. We have Aphrodite Psata. Thank you very much, Aphrodite, for being here. And then from Empirica, we have Georg Voigt with us. They represent two projects, but you'll see they are part of a bigger cluster of projects that I will introduce shortly. And then we have a moderated panel debate, of course, before we close the session. Just a few more slides from my side, and then I pass the floor to our speakers. So this is the cluster, the Next Gen EPC cluster, EPC energy performance certificates, not energy performance contracts. To be very clear, these are projects that have been ongoing since 2019. Some of them have closed. Some of them are still active. For example, we have Aphrodite representing EPBD.wise with us, and Georg Tunes. I'm involved in several of them from the very beginning and have been the main facilitator of these projects. Next to the Next Gen EPC cluster, there is the SRI cluster, so the Smart Readiness Indicator cluster. Some of the projects are working on integrating the two policy instruments in a meaningful way. And getting now to why EPCs are somehow at the center, I like to say that EPCs are linchpin. But then I get a lot of questions from people in the audience, what is a linchpin? So now I think it's the first time I actually put this photo on the slide. So that's a linchpin, that metal part that holds the wheel together. It doesn't mean that it's the only part of the wheel, but without it, all the other components fall apart. So in a way, energy performance certificates, when it comes to the EPBD, as a policy instrument, have this binding effect and are interlinked with all the others that you see on screen. I will not read them out loud. And the Next Gen EPC cluster and also the SRI cluster are a mixture of research and innovation actions and policy uptake actions. So the main intent is to provide to all stakeholders the needed resources to adequately implement and monitor EPBD in an evidence-based approach, because that's the most important thing, that we ensure buildings actually perform in reality. So again, congratulations to Stefan and his team. This is the lengthy process we have been going through. Many of you have been actively involved, some of you only following. But we are finally now after the adoption, and we have a deadline. The time is already ticking. I think there are still 700 and something days left for member states to transpose the revised EPBD, and the deadline is 29th of May 2026. As EU projects funded to support the EPBD implementation, you can imagine that we were involved in all the steps. Last question. Who knows what these numbers represent? Just a raise of hands. I will not give you the mic. Even if you think you know and maybe you're not correct, you can just raise your hand. Okay, so then it's important that I put this. EPBD, you know, came in its initial version 2002. We are now 2024, the fourth version, right? The revised EPBD, and this is the evolution. We started with 17 articles. We are now at 38. I'll not mention the recitals. Annexes, there was one. Now we have 10. Why is this important, at least in my biased point of view? Because building performance is a complex process. It's not a one-off exercise. It's an ongoing process. When we talk about assessment, certification, management, and we've seen what can happen if we try to oversimplify a complex process. The end users, the people, we are all people of course, might perceive these policy instruments as a burden because it's oversimplified and it doesn't necessarily bring them added value. EPBD has supported the transformation of the market deeply. There has been a lot of progress, but in my opinion now, also thanks to all these projects that have been funded by CINEA and EASME before, and yeah, the agencies change name once in a while, I think we are now really in the position to make this happen with this revision, to make this twin green and digital energy transition happen for our building stock in the EU. And now we will dive in details exactly how we can support this process from the EU project side of things, and how the European Commission is looking at the next 2 years, these 700 and something days left for implementation. Without further ado, I invite here with us, you have seen the bios of all our speakers on our interactive EUSEW page, so I will not be reading that again. I guess Stefan Moser is ubiquitous by now. I don't only need to say that he's the head of unit B3, Buildings and Products, and then I pass the floor to you, Stefan, please.
Thanks a lot, Andre. Good afternoon to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon and dive into more details of the transposition and implementation of the EPBD. As you said, I mean, this has been a long process, fourth revision, building on experience, but thanks in particular to a very active engagement from the stakeholder community. It is basically a collection of, I would say, good practices from across the member states, with very active involvement also from member states in the preparation and, of course, crucially in the negotiation of this text, and the European Parliament having invested enormously in a quality framework, I would say, where the different policy objectives meet and come together. And then it was the collective duty of the interinstitutional negotiator to find, I would say, a balanced, mutually acceptable outcome. As you know, the discussions have been, of course, influenced by various considerations and forces, also political views. So this was the I would say, the responsibility of the chief negotiators of the three institutions in that process. But building essentially on views by you and other stakeholders from NGOs, from industry, from building owners, from those who have to advise and who are working on the ground together with the citizens in the one-stop shops, but also those having invested in knowledge in the EPCs, in the energy performance certificates, but also how to make a renovation happen successfully. And we see buildings increasingly as part of the overall, on the one hand, energy system, but also society, and need to see it as part of society because firstly, they interact. They're not just receivers of energy and then something's happening inside, and the less you need, the better. But buildings are producing renewable energy. They are taking up, they are giving away energy. They can, of course, react to price signals, to situations where there's plentiful supply, and the opposite when there's not enough. And buildings become more and more intelligent, interactive, smarter. So there's the smart readiness, very important. And citizens, of course, think also beyond energy, beyond climate. They want to have buildings as a place to live, to have comfort, and have efficient building services when it comes also to non-residential buildings, where the objectives of the users are fully met. So that's where we need to basically position ourselves and try to implement also properly in the future. I would say from a citizen-oriented approach, we need to see what happens by those who are at the receiving end of all this, and at the same time the decision makers in the buildings, either as owners or tenants or users of a building, and of course then also the local authorities, the urban planners, how they can accompany and also steer, interact with the citizens on this. in a cross-cutting manner, so system integration, but I would say broader urban planning perspective, where it comes to bringing together the buildings agenda with the mobility agenda, grids planning, production of renewable energy, zero carbon energy, and also aesthetic elements, how a city should look like, adaptation to climate change, very important in the future, greening a city, creating spaces basically which interact with the buildings, and the aesthetic component, of course, that we make buildings sufficiently attractive. Increasingly important is also the issue of affordability, so affordability of renovations and, of course, buildings overall, including new builds. So that's part of the social question. We have, on the one hand, the challenge of renovating the worst performing buildings, supporting the vulnerable citizens there, but it's much broader than that. Also, those with a middle income struggle with the affordability of housing. So that's an increasingly important policy agenda as well, which we have to take into account. From that perspective, we need also to see how we can support that very important policy priority through the renovations policy, for instance, through serial renovations and I would say a full consideration of the different objectives which we want to achieve, that we don't just think in terms of energy or climate, but also what is the future evolution in a city, what needs to happen, what are the uses of buildings, to prioritize really, and try to bring costs down as much as we can, having very efficient renovation schedules in place. So there the building renovation passport comes in very importantly, to make sure that at least what is happening makes sense also in the longer perspective, doesn't have to be undone. And that this basically is then also linked with the affordability agenda measures to try to, of course, support from the society point of view the building sector in a broader sense, so that there will be at least reduced pressure on from an affordability point of view. So that is what we need to do. What we have in terms of policy objectives in the directive, in the EPBD, that of course is a buildings energy directive, energy in buildings directive, as the name says, but the different synergies are addressed. So safety, comfort, quality of life. Climate is very much linked to energy, but also environment. And then the links to mobility in particular, but also production of renewable energy on the rooftops. So that we have in the directive itself, looking left and right, basically. We have the concept of zero emission buildings as the destination, so as an optimization between energy demand and the cleanliness, one can say, of energy going into the buildings, renewable energy or zero carbon energy, which leaves some flexibility for the member states to define what that is through the buildings codes, through the cost optimal methodology. So it's not the same outcome everywhere, even in the same member state, depending on the climate zone. And then that's basically where we need to go over the next 2.5 decades. So it's a generation long challenge where the building stock needs to be really transformed and focus primarily on the existing buildings as the very vast majority of buildings which will still be there in 2050. So a small proportion will be from the new builds in terms of achievements towards that goal, but that's a relatively negligible part. And then we have the different instruments, which Andre already mentions, the EPCs as the linchpin. One can also say, what I'm sometimes saying is the diagnosis. Yeah? So the diagnosis of what actually is the building about, what are the strengths and especially weaknesses, what needs to be improved in a building. And the quality of that diagnosis, as with a medical doctor, is absolutely essential to be able to calibrate the medication, so the measures to improve that building. And at the same time, from a broader perspective, so as individually, you basically have your diagnosis, but from a broader I would say, society point of view, you can then also set priorities in terms of public health of your building stock, what to focus on. And that requires a deep conversation at the urban level, but also more broadly at the regional and eventually also the national level, what to focus on, what to do first, second, and how to design your support schemes, rules, frameworks, but also support schemes financially, but also what efforts basically to do, to undertake as a society. And I think the local level is the most important one, irrespective from the rules, of course, set to be set at national level and the broader framework to be calibrated, financial, and so on. Yes, of course, but at the local level is basically where the decision needs to be taken, what to go into first, what buildings concretely, from the public buildings at the local level, but also neighborhoods. How do we take people by the hand in a partnership, in a true partnership, not telling people what to do, but rather how do we bring forward neighborhoods, certain streets, what are the solutions, how do we overcome the barriers which may be there in terms of maybe scarce workforce, installers, for instance, those who can help in executing the renovations, but also how to get the permissions, the planning permissions, and to network really with all the different actors at the local level. So this is where probably the most important efforts need to be undertaken from the very practical side. And there, I think we have the one-stop shop as the most important tool in the EED, Energy Efficiency Directive, and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, where information is offered to society in a way which makes it accessible, where you have a direct interaction with an advisor who can come to your place and advise you step by step, firstly, what are the things to be improved about your building, and also how to do it, who can help you, whom to ask, and how also to get financial support. And in particular important where there are several decision makers which have to come together in multi-apartment constellations, but also where you have neighbors in a street where you need to work together because you cannot just decide yourself individually. The evidence basis comes from the EPCs, but the how to make it work comes then from the one-stop shops and the network of local enablers, including the installers, the ones who make it happen, and that there's basically a common understanding also what are the solutions which are available in a specific local or regional context in terms of urban heat planning, urban heating solutions, district heating or cooling. How to interact, the smartness of buildings, how do we interconnect the different buildings, what is the grid strength, or do we need to reinforce the grid, for instance, at the local level? All these questions need to be very, very much taken seriously. And from the bottom, basically from the bottom up, from the local level upwards, there needs to be this intensive contribution then and detailed contribution to the building renovation plans at national level. We need to be granular, basically, in addressing the barriers and trying to overcome them. The broader policies will have to be set, of course, at the national level, but being informed and inspired by what needs to be done from the local perspective. So this is very important. And the projects which have been carried out by CINEA and many of you on the various components, on the tools, are absolutely crucial because they identify good practices. I'm not even saying they always need to be best practices, but what our objective will be is to spread the good practices across the national territory, but also across all member states. We can, of course, still try to improve certain practices to create even better practice. But I think we could already be very satisfied if we expanded the existing good practices across the European Union as they stand today and make sure they are available with certain adaptations to the national or local context and simply implement that. There would be a huge advancement already. And I think there you create practical use cases with these projects, how this can work, a kind of menu. What do you do if you want to do this, and how can you put it in place? Because what is most important is to avoid mistakes which have already been, or to build on experiences which have been made elsewhere and avoid mistakes hereby. That is so much more efficient because it creates trust also by those implementing it afresh elsewhere. And the confidence, basically, that it has already worked somewhere else. So we get inspired by that. As human beings, we want to see what others have already been doing and not just be pioneers. I mean, this is very costly, of course. So that is a very important, I would say, challenge for the implementation of this directive. Within the next 2 years, by transposing that into national frameworks, but then implementing it in particular on the ground, being inspired by those projects and by these good practices which exist already. So that's I would say, the confidence which I have that there will be, in the end, the possibility, and it will be possible to create trust and confidence in amongst citizens that this is a challenge which we can undertake, where we won't be overwhelmed, where the fears can be reduced, because many people feel, of course, uncertain and overwhelmed, because everyone is concerned directly. But by showing that this is possible and what to do in which sequence, with the help of a local advisor, helps a lot in creating that confidence. And I think we will have to check, of course, once in a while and be very open to any suggestions if anything needs to be improved from the broader framework or even specifically in national context. But I'm relatively confident that there will be a positive narrative, a positive showcasing across the different member states, across societies, and also that citizens will develop more than maybe today with the political debates which sometimes have taken place, that it was more like a negative light to overcome this and show that this actually creates mutual benefits and quite far-reaching benefits for society, pay off in the long term, investment cases basically, and not a burden or some I would say idealistic action only, which some people are opposed to, but that there are several objectives being met by society and by individuals at the same time by doing this. So with that, I look forward, of course, to the further exchanges, in particular the good practices and what actually will be useful to be put in this, I would say, compendium of inspirations, of inspirational material. And I think that we need to spread and really expand across the European Union and all member states. Thank you very much.
Stefan, thank you very much. I'll just make a quick reference because the projects that I displayed earlier have worked a lot on talking to people. It's called ethnographic research. I didn't know what it means when we started the process, but we had these ethnographers. You know, usually they go in locations where you still have aboriginals living, like in remote locations, in nature, in equilibrium and all that. So they taught us how to talk to people, but we talk to people in our society, of course, about building performance and all that. And it turns out people are interested. They are capable of understanding. It's just a matter of adjusting the language. So if you're a building professional, you couldn't talk to them as you talk to your colleagues on site when you design or install. You need to adjust the language, but people are interested and they want to do and play their role in this transition. And I think what you said about one-stop shops, that gets very close to what they actually required. I always had in my mind that people need a building coach. Because we have a doctor, this analogy is very easy. We have a mechanic for our bikes, cars. We have a psychologist for our head, our brain. So for buildings, I guess we need a coach to take us through this journey. One person that we can trust. We know they don't have any interest behind to promote something just to make a living out of. So thank you very much, Stefan. More to continue in the debate. I already have a couple of questions that I would really like to hear your perspective. So we are going now to our second keynote speaker, and that's Ulrike Nuscheller from the Green Deal Agency. Maybe Ulrike will say the full name. She will be talking, she will give you an overview of all the building supportive EU projects and also with an emphasis on the build-up portal, which some of you, I'm sure, are very aware of. Ulrike, the floor is yours. I forgot to mention, yes. That happens. I tripped 3 times, so.
Okay. So, thank you very much. I think André and Stefan have prepared the ground perfectly for my presentation. So just to start, this is the header slide. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a big honor for me to speak here. About this presentation has the objective to really show how our projects would contribute to policy implementation. It should give you an idea what solutions and the kind of support that our projects can offer towards addressing the biggest challenges that we are facing when we head towards a carbon neutral building stock. And this is why the title of the presentation could have also been Turning Policy into Action. And just to say that just 3 weeks ago, I think, we have been organizing a veritable Buildings Project Weeks with a series of events that brought together all kinds of projects from across the programs. And it was impressive to see how all these projects help implement policy. So, but to really start the presentation now. So, and I've even written it in case I forget it again. So let's start with an introduction. Who are we? So if I say we, who are we? CNEA. CNEA, we are the European Climate, Infrastructure, Environment Executive Agency. But as Anna said, the nickname would be Green Deal Agency. You see on the slide that CNEA manages 7 big programs, but the arrows would point you to those programs that are most relevant for today's context. Namely, the Horizon Europe program on the one hand, and the Life Clean Energy Transition on the bottom. These are the programs that I dare to say are those programs that support most prominently activities in the area of buildings. Let me start with Horizon Europe. So Horizon Europe, and this is the main difference towards LifeSet, supports mainly research and demonstrations activities. And it does this for buildings mostly within the Cluster 5 and the so-called New European Bauhaus mission. You see the big orange bubble, that would show the portfolio of buildings projects on Horizon Europe. 64 projects so far with a total funding of about 373 million euros, so lots of money. The green bubbles would display the different areas that are covered by the project. And you see, I want to pick just that right top bubble, energy performance certification. Why do I want to pick it? Because it's the home of 2 projects that are integral part also of this EPC, Next Generation EPC cluster that is our host today. So those projects would be Chronicle and Smart Living EPC. But they do it together with 10 other projects. We're going to look into this. One last remark on Horizon Europe. If you're interested in funding, there are two calls that are either open or opening. One is the New European Bauhaus call with a total funding of 17.8 million, which is open until 19th of September. And there's the next Cluster 5 call with altogether 5 topics and a funding of 50 million euros. And that opens on the 17th of September. Now coming to Life Clean Energy Transition, which is my program to say, and it perfectly ties in with what Stefan said and everything he said about the legislative context. It's exactly the spirit of the Clean Energy Transition Program to support the implementation of EU policies and legislation on the ground. And how do we do this? The LIFE program tries to remove market and regulatory barriers. It tries to create an enabling framework for clean energy solutions, approaches, products, and also measures. The Life Clean Energy Transition tries to improve the governance, the capacities, and the skills of different actors at all levels. It tries to mobilize investments and improve access to finance. And it empowers citizens. And finally, it develops and replicates best practices, and you were mentioning a lot the best practices, or the good practices, Stefan, across Europe. So contrary to Horizon Europe, on the LifeSet, we focus on the non-technological barriers, and so this also mean we would not fund pure research and demonstration activities. Just some quick words on how we operate and our newest calls for those who are interested in this. So we work within the frame of bigger so-called intervention areas within which we define every year so-called core topics that should respond to the most urgent policy needs. In most topics, we offer 95% of funding, and typically our projects are smaller than the ones of Horizon. They're around 1.5 to 2.5 million euros usually. The call is open until 19th of September. This is for me the key slide, because it shows how LifeSet supports the implementation specifically of the EPBD and how it responds to the challenges in the building sector. So if we start on the top line, deep renovation or renovation, our projects, for example, promote the rollout of prefabricated elements to make renovation more standardized, faster, less burdensome, and better coordinated. Moreover, if you look at the second bar, our projects work on the design and consistency of EPCs, and that we have been mentioning as well. They test the accuracy, for example, of EPC assessments. They explore new, more holistic features, but they also integrate assessment tools and procedures across the instruments, notably EPCs with renovation passports and the Smart Readiness Indicator. So, talking about the Smart Readiness Indicator, you see in the third bar that our projects also support member states in the testing and rollout of the Smart Readiness Indicator, and they also train, for example, the assessors. As regards data, and that is the fourth bar, in particular the EU Building Stock Observatory, but we're going to come to this again, but also our normal projects, normal in this kind of science, help collect and structure data and improve the access to data. In the area of skills, our projects contribute to detecting skills gaps, to developing qualification schemes, and to fostering innovative training methods. But also our projects help to put in place integrated services, and this was also mentioned by you, both of you, for the renovation of private and public buildings, coordinating the whole customer journey. So this is known as one-stop shops. Finally, they provide technical assistance for developing bigger energy efficiency projects. They help develop and deploy innovative financing models and tools that make access to financing easier and then also make energy efficiency a more salient aspect in financing criteria. Wow. So just one slide that would again summarize the building-related areas and topics that we address on the LifeSet and our calls for proposals. I could even mention more. We have heating and cooling, anything that is local. Everything somehow is connected to buildings, but I want to mention these, which is deep renovation, data and tools, smart buildings and services, build-up skills, policy implementation, project development assistance, one-stop shops, and consumers. And in case you look for it, for the building-centric activities in our work program, so deep renovation, data and tools, and smart buildings and services, you would find them under the title Bettereno. Let me also highlight one of the boxes that is there, which is the policy topic, which will become relevant just after my presentation, you will see, which is a more horizontal policy implementation topic. So, but we don't only have our normal calls for proposals and the grants. The program also supports strategic policy initiative, and this we do in close collaboration with our colleagues in DG Energy. So on the slide, you see those 4 initiatives that are most relevant in the area of buildings. And I want to start with the top right, with the European Building Stock Observatory, also called the BSO, and which is, in its new version, becoming really the European repository for data and for information on the building stock. It does not only host data and indicators, it also gives fact sheets and all kinds of useful information. And the new version went online this spring. With the EPBD Recast, it even gets a stronger policy dimension, as now member states are required to transfer their building stock data to the BSO. So now I jump to the citizen-led renovation, which is the box below it. That provides technical assistance to energy communities for energy-saving renovation projects. There was a first call for pilots, which closed in May. Now, concerted action, which is very close to my heart. The concerted action gathers for the implementation of the EPBD. There's also one for ED, one for the Renewables Directive, one for products. But it gathers the implementing bodies of the 27 member states, and I think Norway. And it offers them a forum to exchange, but also to flag challenges, but mainly to share best practices, and there we're back to the best practices and solutions. And the concerted action has really proven to be a very effective tool in this implementation. And it also provides regularly an opportunity for our projects, that might also be you, to showcase their solutions. Finally, on the top left, you see the build-up portal, but that is going to have a dedicated slide, namely this one. So the build-up portal is the European portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. It's recognized as the central website, even in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and to be precise, in Article 29.4. But it's much older, because since Build-up has been sharing and promoting existing knowledge, guidelines, tools, and best practices for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings already since 2009. Also, our host today, the Next Generation EPC cluster, has contributed, I can say, enormously to the activities and exchanges hosted on and hosted via the Build-up platform. And many thanks for that as well, because you make it really an active exchange platform. And with the revisions of the main pieces of sustainable energy legislation, the focus of the portal will be even more strongly focused on supporting the implementation of the EPBD. And there the new elements, but it will also consider other relevant provisions that are coming from the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive. Just to give you examples, that would be, for example, enhancing the work on zero-emission buildings, on skills and finance, but also on consumers. But you're very welcome to check it out, and I wonder where this... There it is, via the QR code that you would see on the slide. So, last slide, don't worry. So this is my last slide, yes. And here you find an overview of the ongoing and hopefully future projects as well, that we cannot really name, but they will hopefully become reality. Those projects that work specifically on energy performance certificates, sorted by programs and calls. The common denominator of all these projects is really their work on energy performance certificates, but they all do it from different angles, and they all focus on different aspects. To mention some. For example, the projects explore the possibilities of new technologies, and in this, they would make EPCs more digital and more accurate. And here I would mention Smart Living EPC and Chronicle. But other projects, for example, they aim to link EPCs with other instruments, notably the renovation passports and digital logbook, and this is the case of IB Road to EPC and EPC Recast. Other projects focus on data collection and data integration to make EPCs more robust, and there I would like to mention TimePack. Then EU Super Hub factors in, for example, life cycle aspects, cross-cert, explores the implementation of the EPC instruments across different countries, and both projects even have a strong training and skills dimension, which we know is super crucial. Now, the new generation of LifeSet projects, and here I mention Smart EPC, IEPB, and Tunes, all strive to facilitate the deployment of EPCs inter alia by synchronizing and reconciling energy performance assessments with other instruments, and here, more specifically, EPCs with a Smart Readiness Indicator. You will hear about this later on. But we also fund, and that's what I already said, horizontal policy implementation projects, which you will just get to know with the next presentation, and I want to mention EPBD.wise. Just one last comment. All these projects will, or I'm sure they will, contribute and support our work on EPC, on guidance for the implementation of the EPBD. That's at least our hope, but also what we expect. And with this, I would want to close. Thank you again, and hand over back to André.
Thank you very much, Ulrike, for the nice overview from the project, both grants and also service contracts. I like what you said in the end, and I also want to say again, as I said many times, a big thank you to both colleagues at CINEA and DGNR for having considered this cluster in a way like a EU-level stakeholder. I have this feeling that we are like an association with members. The only difference is that we are very holistic, technology inclusive, not to say technology neutral anymore, because we are inclusive. And our aim, of course, is to support adequate and effective transposition of the EPBD and implementation. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Aphrodite from Efficient Buildings Europe. She will give the perspective of one of these projects that we have been mentioning, EPBD.wise, and of course make also the link with the other projects, some of the other projects in the bigger cluster. Aphrodite, welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andre, for inviting me to present EPBD.wise project today. So the project is on policy implementation for the EPBD, funded by the LifeSet program. It started last October 2023 and is going to run for the next for 33 months. So you see here some of our partners, and one of them, at least I see, is here today. If you would like to talk to him, I see Rui from Aden, if you'd like to talk to him later. So we have a wide variety of EU-level partners, but also national partners that is going to help us with our national work in the next months. So you see here the countries that we are going to focus on: Bulgaria, Greece, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Ukraine. Ukraine because they have to implement the EU acquis in order to become an EU member. So EPBD.wise, in a nutshell, so what do? We will provide on-the-ground technical support for these 6 focus countries for the implementation of the EU Buildings Directive on 5 elements. So these elements are very important for the implementation of the Buildings Directive. So starting from the first one, national building innovation plans. So we think this is one of the key planning tools to achieve our innovation goals for 2050. Then we have minimum energy performance standards, which are going to be one of the cornerstone elements to achieve the targets of the national building renovation plans. And then we have 2 tools that will support them: energy performance certificates and building renovation passports, which are complementary. And at the end, we also have the zero emission buildings standard. So all these elements are complementary, and they interact, and they have a lot of synergies, as you can see in the image on the slide. So just to give a bit more information about the goals of the project. So what are we going to do? We're going to support member states to implement the new policies, but also ensure consistency between the different EPBD policies. Then integrate good monitoring and reporting mechanisms, but also help public officials in the ministries to increase collaboration between the different ministries and to enhance their understanding and to help them build better policies and design better policies. But what are we actually going to do at the national level? So stay tuned. Until the end of June, we're going to publish 5 reports on the policy needs and specific best practices for each of the 5 topics. So our partners in the project, they have assessed the policy needs for the countries together with our national partners and public officials from the ministries on the ground. And at the same time, now we're hosting the first round of the national policy forums / workshops. For example, 3 of them have already taken place. They take place in the national language, in person. So we all have already organized 3 in Bulgaria, Greece, and Romania. As we speak today, the one in Hungary is taking place. And next Wednesday, we have the policy forum in Poland, and I think on the 1st of July, online, the policy forum for Ukraine. So all these, the reports on the policy needs and the best practices, the policy forums, the important work to prepare for the upcoming policy guidelines that our partners at us are going to write for the focus countries. So guidelines, guidance to implement these 5 topics. And of course, we will focus also on replicability actions within the concerted action EPBD via webinars and other meetings. So 2 of my slides are not there, but I'm going to mention, give a little teaser on some of the elements that are going to be in the policy reports assessing the needs for each country. Starting, for example, and here it's a table where it shows which key elements have been prioritized and identified for each country. Due to time and budget constraints, we could only focus to 2 or 3 max per country. And that's the ones we assessed and we're using for the theme of the policy forums in each country. So starting from the national building renovation plans, so a draft of these plans is going to be published by the end of 2025, and then the final version of that plan should be published by the end of 2026. Now our researchers, together with the national partners and the ministries, they identified a few challenges, namely the lack of data or the lack of detailed data. They identified that there was a difficulty of creating concrete renovation strategies and linking them to specific financing instruments. So they need support on how to collect better, robust data, on how to analyze them, on how to estimate the costs for the renovation, or how to identify financing instruments. And then for the minimum energy performance standards, some of the challenges there are similar to the ones for the building renovation plans. For example, lack of data or how to identify the worst performing buildings. But also in some of the Central Eastern European countries, we also have the challenge, the demographic challenge, where some buildings in rural areas are empty, or in some countries the EPC costs are quite high. Then on the important tools to support MEPs and the building renovation plans, so energy performance certificates and building renovation passports. So for EPCs, so our researchers, so ADEN had assessed a wide variety of EU projects on EPCs, a lot of them from the next, I think maybe all of them from the Next Gen EPC cluster. And some of the challenges identified were on how can we ensure the quality of the EPC, how can we ensure that the database, the quality of the database, where they're published on, how can we ensure skilled auditors that are going to issue these EPCs, how to ensure interoperability between EPCs and renovation passports, how the smart readiness indicator could be integrated in the EPCs. So these policy needs that have been specifically identified for each country, and they have asked us to work on those for the policy guidelines. So the researchers, our partners, and the national partners are going to work on those for the next months. And it would be a deliverable that we would issue, I think, next year, towards the end of next year. So thank you for inviting me today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask during the event or afterwards, or even ask one of our partners that is here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aphrodite. We now pass the floor to Georg Voigt. He will be talking about the TUNES project and again also making reference to all the other projects in the cluster. Like EPBD.wise, TUNES is also very horizontal and has a binding effect on all these projects in the cluster. So welcome, Georg. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andre. Thank you, everybody, for attending, listening to what we have to say. The project is Empirica, us together with 3 technical partners supporting 7 energy agencies in their transposition and preparation of the implementation of the, in particular, EPC and SRI instruments from the EPBD Recast. And yeah, this slide you've seen in some form. It's the projects, and all of the projects have done good practice or tried practice. And sometimes this practice might even have failed, and we took it on as one measure to collect all these practices in one document in a short version, to simply know what is there, what is out there, what has worked, what has not worked, to have the evidence. The energy agencies, if they are going to implement policy, they should make good propositions to their responsible ministries into what kind of solution should be chosen in the national context. And from these practices, many of which were good, some are the best in national context. Yeah? They only are good and best in national context because of the circumstances and what you want to achieve. So currently, as it stands, the documents collects the 66 practices. Each project is represented multiple times, and we also have national projects because some are innovative through national programs and might be helpful on, across Europe as well. Aside from EPC, we obviously also collect SRI, as the project has to cover both areas. Before the EPBD Recast was finalized, we have structured the practices along 5 key questions: understand EPC, upgrade EPC, databases and tools, integration of instruments, in particular EPC and SRI, but you can also see this in a broader way, and the SRI itself. So for each practice, we collect the motivation, why is it there, what it is, any lessons learned, and any policy recommendations there might be. If you are representing any of these projects and have done research on it, we invite you to contribute. The document is public access, it can be edited, and we want your detail, your fact. When we collect the TUNES projects, as much as we want to read, we don't know the project as well as you do, so please follow the link, have a look on your project, contribute, and make sure that the evidence is recorded, because the member states need the evidence to make the case for the policy, for your instrument, for your practice, which is good, and bringing EPC further than it was in any given member state across Europe. A few examples in the area of understanding the EPC. An EPC contains recommendations, and the EPBD Recast introduces a new instrument, the renovation passport. So there is some distinction to be made, which is a challenge the energy agencies are facing right now, and we are working on. But ultimately, the recommendations already exist in EPCs had a quality problem. They need to be better, so that people act, that they understand what they should do, and maybe understand what impact it has. And 2 projects I'd like to mention, I brought to EPC and Chronicle, have been working on means to guided, aided procedures, but also automated procedures, create better recommendations, and ultimately renovation passports, so the plans for net zero building in the future. This is work in progress, particularly when it comes to the renovation passport, but it shows paths, ways you could go in a member state to get further. On the bottom right, you see projects which have also worked on in this area. Similar to upgrade EPC, so basically you have an EPC, it contains information that is related to the performance, but around it, maybe not directly on the document itself, but surrounding it, and particularly in larger buildings or large building portfolios, you might want to collect other indicators. And now the question is, how do you match them? If you have certain data, what can you do with the data to maybe calculate something else? You have to calculate through other obligations. And multiple projects such as Smart Living EPC, EPC Recast, and TimePack have worked on identifying these overlaps, which methods you could use to translate the data into one or the other way, and which data sources might be available in any member state which are already useful and helpful to do such calculations. And one final example is on databases and tools. So the EPBD clearly demands that access to EPC has to be established. The EPC instrument is old, but so far the data has been not properly used. And the one obvious thing is just to collect it and put it online, once in a while transfer it to the building observatory. But maybe you can do more if you've already established this database, such as integrating it with other data, other databases which might exist, building-related databases. And how do you match this data? CrossCert explains what data sets there are, and the EUB Superhub, sorry for not knowing the acronyms entirely, has approached this with a GIS coding. So basically the building doesn't move, it has a location, and through the location you can identify a specific building, and any database which has recorded the location of the building can therefore be matched with other databases, and you can extract information from it without having to build something entirely new where you duplicate effort. As an outlook, all of these projects are progressing. This means that evidence continues to be recorded and our guidance will be updated. And it will also include future projects such as Smart EPC, which is providing a unified platform on all the digital tools just mentioned, in that they become accessible to you through one link, not through 10 project links, but through one link. And IEPB is working on a common data model, which is linked to the example I just mentioned in the database section, into understanding how you can make various existing databases relate to each other and utilize this data at least on national level. Yeah? The ultimate goal is maybe European level, but if you achieve it on national level, this is what matters. There is the policy. And it will also include a guide, basically how to do it. The other area TUNS is working on, because this is evidence, what member states can do, but now member states have to make choices, what to do. And the European Union, the European Commission as an institution, is not only giving guidelines to everybody, it also has their own guidelines, the Better Regulation Guidelines, which is a very advanced tool set by now on how to make policy, and policy should be made evidence-based. Yeah, we are not, Brussels is not coming up with solutions just like that. It has done rigid research and assessment on what are good options to ultimately implement. And the procedure as such is transparent, that everything is documented and inclusive in that everybody had a say. And by now, we, Empirica, do these projects for the European Commission, but we believe that this tool set is so advanced and mature that it could also benefit member states. And 7 energy agencies were so brave to try it with us and basically implementing a light version of the Better Regulation Guidelines for impact assessments in choosing the best policy for the EPCs and SRIs. We've already learned the ultimate pose, with the backwards, and I give you one tool from the Better Regulation Guideline, which I think works in every parts of life, not only into making policy. Sorry that the layout is a little bit broken here. So in the middle you have the problem, Something is wrong, something is not right. Let's say the example is your bike tire has a hole, It's flat. Now this has consequences. You might be late for work. You might have to spend the time and effort and money to repair this bike. And because you're late, other things happen. There are costs to it. So with these 2 steps, you can already consider, is this a relevant problem? If your bike is only in the garage, it doesn't matter. It can remain unfixed. If it is something you truly use for work, yeah, then it's an urgent problem and has many consequences and you need it, especially if there is no other forms of transport available to you. Now, if you want to, you can first fix the problem. In this case, it's fixable, but you also want to avoid any drivers. You also, the cause of it, you want to remove the cause. If your bike is standing in a place where there's always broken glass, your tire will be broken again. There will be another flat, and you will have another flat, and you will have another flat. So the driver is the real thing we want to tackle to avoid of the problem reappearing. The member states' task is to understand what has gone wrong with EPCs and where lies the issue, in that they can then tackle it, modify the policy, and avoid of the problem re-emerging. With SRI, it's a new instrument, so it's more easier, let's put it this way, but the current state is that energy agencies have basically developed this problem tree for their country, and the problems overlap to a degree, but they also diverge because of the way the member states have so far implemented the EPC over the past 10, 15 years. If you're an energy agency or ministry or other related policy-making body, here is an open door policy. So we will first of all provide guidance, this basic guidance on how to do this, together with the other practice collection. And if you are working on EPC SRI, you're invited to join us, and we will provide you with support and all the tools you need to do so. You just simply contact us. There's no commitment in any form. I understand that the tools are, first of all, intimidating. There are. I mean, 600 pages is not easy. Not all of it is relevant, just a bit. But they are very, very good and a very good mindset to make good policy. With that, I'd like to thank and hand over back to André. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georg. So with that, we conclude the listening part of our session. We started a bit late, so I think we can extend 5 more minutes from the coffee break. If some of you really need to leave at 4 sharp, then yeah, feel free to do that. So we start now the interactive part. Before, I have a collection of questions based on the presentations given by our dear keynote speakers and speakers. But if somebody has a burning question from the audience, we could take 2 to start with, and then we continue. Okay, so I let you think more. Please, it will be open for all of you. If not, we can just continue ourselves, because we have many things to talk about. And this setting is, in my opinion, one of the first times we bring together in such a public setting in the Sustainable Energy Week, the EPBD implementation from DG and Air side of point of view, and also from the EU projects that are supporting all these activities. Stefan, I will start with you. This is like the power pose. I think we need to learn, all of us. What is the correct way to call this EPBD? Is it EPBD Recast, like the second one was, or revised EPBD? Because I've seen both, and I don't know which is the correct one. Have you sorted this out at DGNL?
Both is correct. Revised means basically changed, or text which has been complemented with other provisions, modified. And recast means not only a few provisions, but the whole text has got a new numbering. Is basically, and the previous text has been repealed in its entirety, but the previous elements have been integrated in a new flow text. Yeah? So whereas revised is a more general term, it can also be revised can be either a recast or an amended directive, which means the original text still holds, and there's another text which says in Article 3 you add 1 sentence here, and in Article 5 another sentence there. So both is correct. Yeah? But recast is the more, I would say, precise form of what has happened in this case.
Okay. So for a note for all of us, because in 2018 we were calling that version amended EPBD. That's something now I learned that that's close to revised, more or less. So this is a recast then.
The revised covers both, so it's revised means just changed.
But in this instance, it's better to say EPBD recast.
I say both, personally. So
yeah, okay. Then just use these two. Thank you. Then another thing, Stefan, because we briefly touched upon the one-stop shops, that would be something very supportive for people. And in my opinion, I think we are now at a place where building technology exists. We have innovative approaches. The projects have explored this a lot. And in my personal opinion, I think the financing and the skills part are some that still need to be further fine-tuned. I think the projects already cover a bit. There are some good practices emerging, but now this EPBD really goes much deeper in terms of financing and skills. Could you maybe say a few more words about these aspects?
Well, financing and skills are part of the enabling framework. The directive has expanded very much the provisions on the enabling framework, which covers finance, but also information, the one-stop shops in more detail, tenants protection, support to vulnerable citizens, the skills. So whatever is basically needed has at least a hook there. But all that has to be expanded and made to work at the level of implementation in the member states at the local level. And I think one of the most important tools for that are the national building renovation plans, which basically follow, I would say, a bit what Georg has just outlined. Yeah? So they are, in principle, a document which moves from where are the problems, what do we need to solve, where do we want to go, what are the objectives, how do we do that, what are the options for that, and actually what are the better options, and how do we implement that. So that basically is the whole journey from where do we start off, where are all the barriers, how do we overcome them, how do we solve them. So this is, and that requires this inclusive process which I referred to. They can only be good and of sufficient quality and then able to change reality if they're based on a strong contribution from all relevant stakeholders, including at the local level, that everyone involved in building renovations recognizes that plan to be a relevant one, and that basically the actions defined will actually solve the problems, will for instance, attract more people to the sector, will make sure that there will be training programs, curricula, training institutions which can provide the necessary skills to either young people or people changing from other sectors, that there's a clear trajectory, I would say, and convergence of understanding for the capacities needed in the renovation industries in terms of appliances, building materials, what will be needed. On the financing part, that there's a clear division of labor between and division of tasks, allocation of tasks between public financing programs and the private sector coming in and providing most of the volumes, and to design these programs in a way which makes them targeted and at the same time easy to understand and easy to use for the citizens and those having to recur to these funds when deciding and carrying out a renovation. So this is where basically the investment needs to happen. That creates the investment certainty, but also the confidence across society that this is the journey, that uncertainties are reduced, and the main delivery tool, I would say, from the framework to the citizens are then the one-stop shops, which provide the individualized advice to the citizens based on a good understanding of what are the challenges an individual citizen faces, or a municipality, a street, a neighborhood, a district has, and how do they go about it. And there, sometimes it needs to move beyond even a one-stop shops of a pure advisor to become, I would say, a facilitator. This can be done actually by a local politician, an urban councillor, or a professional facilitator bringing together the people by firstly taking stock of their concerns, their objectives, but also trying to create a convergence of what are we going to do, how are we going to go about it, to overcome also different views in terms of addressing the concerns and then creating at least a near consensus of or a very clear majority that people stand behind that. That's very important. So that would be then an active facilitation going beyond pure advice, which will in many cases also be necessary, notably where there are lots of decision makers coming together in multi-apartment buildings, for instance, or whole neighborhoods, whole districts.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Stefan. I have a feeling that somehow this integrated approach or holistic approach that you are bringing in with this recast will have a ripple effect. EPCs had the same effect. It doesn't mean we got it right from the first trial, but we learned from all the experiences gathered so far. But definitely it's going in the best direction now with this recast. Before I pass the floor to Ulrike with a question, I was wondering, Stefan, maybe one last point. Many people in Brussels, the EU bubble stakeholders, as they are called, have the feeling that now, okay, things have ended in Brussels, right, at EU level, and now we need to replicate the process we've been through in the last 2 years in 27 iterations. How do you, as DGNR, support member states in this process that they are ongoing? And what do you think for them might be the biggest challenges now that the EPBD has a bit of a broader scope, a holistic scope, which is addressing the complexity of building performance. So in my opinion, it's directly attacking what should be tackled. But what do you think member states are facing now as a challenge? And you and your colleagues at DGNR, how are you supporting to make the process smoother?
Thank you. So essentially, we are providing guidance documents, preparing guidance documents, some of which are mentioned directly in the EPBD. Others are, I would say, useful, which we identified as useful. But I would say in terms of user-focused approach, so we see what questions come up from the member states, but also from stakeholders, in order to see what can we best provide as, I would say, a mutual understanding of what the directive requires, what could be possible options of implementing, of transposing this directive and implementing it in the member states, in terms of what are the possibilities. The idea is not that there's someone sitting here in an office and knowing everything best, but rather to see what could be differences in understanding, and to create a convergence of understanding between the Commission and the Member States and the stakeholders what the directive requires, and to avoid basically concretely problems later on, that there would be a disagreement between the Commission and Member States, the Commission remaining the guardian of the treaties, so having to enforce the directive, and the member states implementing that on the ground. So we try to work first and foremost in a cooperative manner, right from the start, through the guidance documents, but also, and that has happened in the past and will be continued in the future, through the concerted actions, through the committees, stakeholder meetings, in order to discuss are there different views, what actually could be done in case there's a need or even an active request for advice, and that advice is not just in our heads and someone knows in an office here. We have, of course, experts in our team, but to see what can be brought together as good practices from the member states, what are, I would say, the conditions for success of a certain way of proceeding or an alternative other way of proceeding, how to do that, basically. So that's what we're going to do. So it's going to be very intensive. The directive is only finished in terms of framework for cooperation. So that's what it basically is. It sets certain minimum requirements for what needs to be transposed and implemented by the member states and the stakeholders. But there are lots of, I would say, open areas where member states either can go forward or can then flesh out and define in detail what needs to be done. And as I mentioned, the primary tool for that are the building renovation plans, because their member states will define what of the possible measures on the menu they will use for what particular purpose and what will be the results of that, because in several ways the directive requires sufficiency in progress towards 2050. So there are some milestones, but also the trajectory needs to be sufficiently, I would say, ambitious, feasible, but ambitious towards 2050 by applying these different tools and measures, the programs to be set in place by the member states. And there will be continuous discussions in multilateral forums with the Commission trying to act as a facilitator, but also trying to bring in useful elements in, as I said, through the concerted action, through the committees and the different stakeholder groups. And of course, what you are doing in the projects with SINEA and from within the various actors in European stakeholders. You mentioned that as European bubble, and I know what you mean by that, and it's often used as a word. I don't like personally the word EU bubble, because actually you're representing a broader European civil society. Yeah? So you are the professional representatives, but basically your value added comes not from being here alone and sitting in this room, and many have met already, but by being the liaison persons towards all the 27 member states and beyond, worldwide in many ways, yeah? So that you are able to bring to Brussels, but also bring back to Brussels the relevant insights, a feedback mechanism in two ways. And if that is achieved, then your added value as EU bubble is absolutely outstanding. If it's just a kind of community which heads from one drink to the next, then it's of course very limited. So that's why I think, and you're doing that very much. Yeah? So, but often the word EU bubble is a bit pejorative in terms of it's just the EU bubble. They have no clue about reality on the ground. I think that's important. This kind of feedback mechanism, this conveyor belt towards, but also from the member states and beyond, I would say. So.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Indeed, what I meant with this bubble is that you have, at member state level, this was just to illustrate with an example, when Smart Readiness Indicator was introduced, for a while it was the best kept secret, so everybody that was part of this multi-stakeholder decision-making process, where all member states are represented, also the people via the parliament and so on, so it's outstanding what happens in this bubble, and it's so inclusive, so consultative. But for a while, especially until the 4 SRI cluster projects started, it still remained in a way the best kept secret, because not everybody at national level has access to the information from the bubble, and what happens at national level is not under the control of the authorities here. So that's why I think the projects really support permeating the national markets, and here I address myself to Ulrike, because to me it's very close to magic what happened in the last 6 years since this cluster is in existence. I feel it's so aligned with everything that has evolved in EPBD, and I was wondering, how do you and your colleagues at SINEA ensure that these projects are so linked to real policy uptake and implementation?
First of all, I can also maybe honor the people behind me.
Yes.
I meant it too, but maybe as well.
Hello, Sylvain. Hello, Luca. Glad to have you with us.
That has really a big contribution to that. Now? But it was more a general question, I understand. And of course we have, beforehand we were Horizon Europe, we were Horizon 2020, so we covered everything. But specifically under LifeSet, we really try to make the projects more policy relevant. And how do we do this? We make sure during the evaluation, I mean, it's not us, but it's how we brief the experts, that they really look as a first thing whether the projects have the potential to reach out to stakeholders, to the right stakeholders, because what we really don't want to have is results on a shelf. So this is really an integrated approach across all topics, across all colleagues. Let's make sure that whatever is being produced is being taken up either by policymakers or by other industrial stakeholders. It must be used. This is really what we want. And then specifically, you're mentioning the SRI cluster, the EPC cluster. We have others that are extremely well aligned, but we're also closely working with your unit and with other colleagues also in the other units on the Energy Efficiency Directive, to always check that our projects are in line and really responding to what we need. And it starts also with drafting the core topics already that are co-drafted together with DG Ener to be able to exactly respond to address the most urgent policy needs.
Thank you. So the so-called silo approach is long by now busted as a myth. It's only a myth. It's really outstanding, the work you are doing and the collaborative efforts, because we know in the cluster that going farther together as opposed to fast alone takes sometimes more time. It entails more collaboration. Speaking about the guidance, because the Commission will have the official guidance, I know stakeholders here in Brussels, each of them based on their interests, of course, they are preparing their own guidances. And from the cluster side of things, we are also supportive to guide from the evidence that we have gathered. And my colleagues already shared that they are collecting best practices. We have also what shouldn't be done in certain contexts. But do you have this feeling, because Build Up Portal is like the portal, like the access point for energy efficiency in buildings at EU level. Do you see a potential that Build Up Portal could be supportive of these collection of resources that will become available in the coming months?
Very much. Just to say again that my colleague Luca behind me is the real expert for this. But yes, as you say, the Build-Up Portal is designed as a one-stop shop for not only official documents coming from the Commission, official guidance, but it's also the platform where our other contributions and might be guidance that the industry, for example, develops for the members could find home. And of course, the more activity there is, the better. And indeed, this Build-Up Portal has been strengthened ever since. And our expectation is that it will be even more policy relevant, even more, let's say, comprehensive and integrating in the future, and more vivid in the future, indeed.
Thank you. That's very good news. Now, looking at my colleagues here, Aphrodite and Georg, I was wondering, Georg, now that you've been a bit implementing tunes and you talked to energy agencies, to ministries, how do they find this better regulation guideline? Were they aware of it? That's the first point. And now that they are aware of it, how do they find it useful? Do they find it empowering for their activities?
Yeah, we are mostly working with the energy agencies. They are our partners, and yeah, through the proposal they became aware mostly, I would say. This is simply so. But how do they feel about it? I would say torn is the best word. In a way, it is a new effort, a new way of thinking, or a new way, additional work they haven't done before to some degree. And obviously, it's also public in the sense that you clearly say what has not gone right or what needs solving and so on. But through this comes insight in that they talk this happened to talk with one another and say, this happens to us as well, and this is what we maybe have done already, or this is what we're planning. A and B, they see that this gives them, the energy agencies, which are not at the political level, they are more which word to use? They're not bureaucracy, but technocratic. They see this as an opening to basically shape policy a little bit, in that they can be ambitious. They want to be ambitious. They are people who want to have a very efficient building stock, who want to achieve zero emission goals. And through these tools, they can prepare the policy a little bit better and make it easier to stick with the ministries and the relevant people. So, yeah, on the one hand, it's effort, but on the other hand, they see the potential.
Thank you, Georg. And Aphrodite, since your project is really the most horizontal of the cluster, and you are not only covering EPCs and SRI, but other policy instruments, and somehow you see this integrated approach when it comes to uptake at national level, and the fact that you have already had these policy forums, how do you think what is going to happen now in the wider implementation, so all the articles of the EPBD, and there will be guidance coming from the European Commission, from stakeholders, even from our cluster, of course, based on the results we have had. From your experiences of sharing these best practices and collecting them, how do you think we should, all of us here, like stakeholders, work together to help member states?
Thank you, Andrew, for the question. I think at least for EPBD.wise, what we will try to do is, besides the best practices that we have tried to match to the specific policy needs of the country, is to have also bilateral dialogues between our national partners and the ministries to provide a bit more support than just providing the best practices, because for these countries in Central Eastern Europe, it's usually smaller ministries, maybe not a lot of people, so I think they appreciate that we are there to provide the support. They're very open to the help. So if anyone from you is from these countries and you would like to get involved in the process, there will be another policy forum next year presenting the policy guidelines, but you can also contact us to feed into the policy guidelines for the country. But in general, for implementation, it's true there are quite a few of policy provisions in the EU Buildings Directive, the revised version. So maybe helping them first to focus on the national building renovation plans, to have this long-term perspective, to provide good visibility to the renovation market, to citizens, but also to the industry, to scale up, to the skilled workers, etc. And then I think focusing on the two tools, the EPCs that you said, and the building renovation passports. In some countries, maybe they're not that interested in implementing fully the renovation passport. Maybe they will integrate it in the energy performance certificate, but it still, I think, is going to achieve its objective as long as it supports the other policy provisions, like the minimum energy performance standard, which I think is going to be the one that will achieve, that have the biggest maybe impact, and will drive the renovation demand, hopefully to renovate the worst performing buildings. And I also wanted to add on the financing element. So a few weeks ago, there was a new financing coalition for banks that was launched by the Commission. So private financing is going to be very important. And then better targeting EU public funding, which are quite a lot spread out. There are going to be now the Social Climate Fund as well. So interacting more with the banks will be important. There are going to be national hubs in each country. And in a previous event that we organized, so beyond EPBD.wise, some of the big banks like ING, BNP Paribas, and Deutsche Bank, they're quite open to engage on this issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aphrodite. We are running out of time. If we have 2 questions from the audience, we can address. I see one here. Let's start with that. I come with the microphone.
Maybe this one works.
No? We need to use the microphones from...
Thank you. Hello. Yeah. Hi, I'm Thomas from ECOS. I have a quick question to Stefan. Reading the recast EPBD, I just wanted to ask you if you can confirm that the interim National Building Renovation Plan and the final version, so the 2025 and 2026, they will be made public.
Definitely. The whole purpose is a public and inclusive discussion in the preparation with stakeholders. The draft version will be the one where the Commission will then have a closer look for possible recommendations, but also for discussion with the other member states and, of course, taking in possible comments from stakeholders where they feel that it's still to be improved. So these recommendations then, which the Commission will issue, will hopefully then also inspire member states to do that. Of course, member states, in case they refuse to improve it further, then the question is, are they legally required to do that because there would be some mandatory provisions, or is it just falling short of, I would say, a possible improvement which would be useful, but they are not somehow bound to do it. But everything is public and must be public. The whole purpose is being inclusive and public, and that would be a major point also for the Commission in case this was not the case, were not to be the case, if there was not a kind of fully fledged, I would say, broader discussion with the relevant stakeholders and the different levels of public authorities, including down to the local level, then this would be a major point of actually saying this needs to be achieved before the final version is issued, because only the, I would say, the intensive deliberations across the stakeholder community will lead to a sufficient level of quality and convergence and create this reference framework which we need for investments, but also taking the necessary actions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So with this, we are out of time. Thank you for those that have stayed until the end, also those online, also those in the room. There will be another session on the EPBD in this room, so we continue. For those of you that are not aware of that session, please make note of it. The main takeaway is that we will be having in English guidance at EU level, coming from the institutions, but also the stakeholders, all the activities funded by CINEA. But as Aphrodite said, it's not enough to have that in English. We can start a dialogue supporting member states in English, but we need also stakeholders on the ground to talk in national language. So with that, I invite all of you to continue being involved here at EU level, but also those of you that are active in the national markets, get involved in the process because we need you. The only way we can actually make this EPBD recast reality on the national level and the local level, as Stefan emphasized a lot, that's where magic really happens at local level, is by going together at this. So thank you for your attention, thank you for your patience, enjoy a bit of coffee, and then we come back and talk some more about the EPBD. Thank you.